Welcome to DCB's College Football Preview. Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, we have made it. If you're listening to this fifth and final episode of the podcast in the first hours after it's dropped, you are less than 24 hours from kickoff from college football week 0. We've got 5 games kicking off involving D1 teams this Saturday, and then the rest will start week 1 on August 30th, or at least on that weekend. The games are pretty spread out, but we'll talk a little bit about the week 0 games on the back half of this podcast. We've got a lot to get to today. We're going to talk about Notre Dame. We'll talk about the Pac-2, as I call it. Technically, it's still the Pac-12 or what's left of it. And then we'll run through the G5 real quick. I will try and touch on every team a little bit, but it's not going to be as thorough of a breakdown, and we probably will skip over a few of the less notable ones. There's also one team that I want to re-preview because I feel like I didn't do you guys justice the first time around. I was trying to keep my biases out of it, but I want to do a more thorough preview of Michigan. We'll go through some of the top ranked players I have at different positions: quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and then fewer for the tight ends and offensive lines, but we'll throw them in there as well. The top overall offenses, the top individual impact defenders, and overall defenses in each league. We'll talk about the Heisman Finalists that I have projected, conference title matchups, playoff predictions, and then something I know a lot of you have been waiting for, which is my full list of future bets. Every season that we've placed college football future bets, we have profited at the end of the season. I know some people don't love to wait and have their money tied up all season long, but if you do it year-round, it's basically like giving yourself a nice bonus at the end of each season. That's the way that I like to look at it, and we've got a whole bunch of them lined up for you guys. We've obviously talked through all of these teams individually, a lot of leans thrown in there in each individual episode, but we're going to lock in each bet officially. We'll go through each conference one at a time, including some G5 bets that we're adding to the list today. To those of you who are into the analytics side of things or the betting lines, we will throw our power rating in as well, the top 50. Still working on some of the G5 toward the bottom half of the rating, but we'll throw the top 50 in there at the end for those of you who are interested in that. As I said at the top, though, this, for now, is the final episode of this podcast series. If you guys want me to continue doing this, leave a comment under this video on whatever app you're using, whether that's Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. I will see it, and will hopefully give me some motivation to continue doing this. I've got some ideas for what we can do in the future, but as for now, we will be returning to Spaces on Twitter, which is essentially this, but live. You guys will get to join the conversation on there if you like. We always like to have speakers join us and give their picks or ask questions or just engage with the community. It's a great time every Saturday at 10 a.m. previewing the full slate, so be sure to join us on that throughout the season. Before we get into the business side of things, I want to give a couple of quick shout-outs. First, to my brother. He's helped me so much at every step of the way throughout this podcast, editing, recording, using some of his equipment. Been very helpful, so huge thank you to you. Shout out to Elite Wagers, who also has a podcast that you guys should check out called Sports Talk with Elite Wagers. He was the one that got me into this podcast, got me to do it in the first place. It took a lot of procrastinating, but we got it done, and here we are. So thank you for pushing me to do it, and everybody go check out his NFL preview for that side of the gridiron. Last but not least, a couple of individual shout-outs to a couple people on Twitter, longtime followers and supporters, Sitting Bull and Chance. Thank you guys for being so supportive on every episode. Hope you guys have enjoyed, and I know you guys will be joining us for Spaces. So as I said, I think we can do better with our Michigan preview. Michigan last year finished 8-5, a year after winning a national championship for the first time since 1997. Some would call that a disappointing or a down year for the program, and by the standards, that is true, but I thought they closed the year about as well as you could possibly ask, winning games against Ohio State on the road and then against Alabama as a 3-touchdown underdog in the bowl game. So that could definitely give them some momentum coming into the season. had some struggles throughout the year, mostly due to quarterback play. They shuffled 3 guys around with Davis Warren starting the season. Alex Orji took over for a little bit. They tried Jack Tuttle, eventually settled back with Davis Warren, who did win the game against Ohio State, throwing for just 62 yards. But Michigan's going to have better play at that position this year. There's no doubt about it. Bryce Underwood is a true freshman, but he is the top recruit at the position out of high school and one of the highest rated quarterbacks that we've seen in a while. Dual threat guy, definitely an electric runner. We'll see how polished his arm is early. We know he has a cannon, but the question will be how quickly will he adjust to reading college defenses? That's always the biggest question mark I have for freshmen. I think he may struggle against Oklahoma in that week 2 game on the road at night. That's just a really crazy environment that he's going to have to deal with very early on. But as the season progresses, I expect him to continue to get better and better. He's got some good tight ends that will be great safety blankets for him, including Hayden Hansen, a guy that I have circled to have a big year in stepping up for Colston Loveland, who was the number 12 pick overall in the draft. Other pieces on offense you should know about: 2 running backs. Justice Haynes comes over from Alabama, and Jordan Marshall returns. He played well in the bowl game and should get more snaps this year. The receiver room has been a concern for this team for a while. They had a couple of decent guys on the national title winning team, but outside of that, the Jim Harbaugh era definitely didn't produce a ton of productive receivers. And this year, they're going to have to find a couple of guys that step up. Donovan McCulley comes over from Indiana. He's expected to be the number 1 guy. Frederick Moore has been a guy that has shown potential throughout his career, but they hope will step up to be the number 2. On the other side, Samaj Morgan showed some flashes in his first season on special teams especially. They want him to develop into more of a slot receiver. We haven't seen it yet, but with Chip Lindsey as the offensive coordinator, I would expect to see more receivers, more quicker personnel on the field for Michigan this year. At least that's what I'm hoping. The defense, the front 7 should be absolutely loaded again. I know they lost 2 defensive tackles to the first round of the NFL, but they replaced them with 2 transfers from Clemson and Alabama. Rayshawn Benny also returns. He played plenty of snaps last year, even with Graham in the fold. So Michigan's front 7 will be reloaded. The secondary is more of a question mark, though. Outside of Jair Hill at corner, I'm not exactly sure who's going to be out there getting the most snaps yet. Rod Moore was an all-conference level safety 2 seasons ago, but missed all of 2024 with an injury. He'll be back and should be one of the better safeties in the country if he returns to form, but who knows what he'll look like after missing an entire year. So the secondary is my biggest question mark on defense, and then the receivers on offense. The offensive line also is going to have to figure out a couple of different positions. The left tackle, there were 2 guys battling for the spot. One of them just went down with an ACL injury, a very promising 5-star freshman that they were excited about. So that is a blow to that unit. But again, he was battling for a spot. So we will see what that offensive line looks like. That'll play a huge role in how Underwood looks early. But I like that he has a solid run game and a couple of good tight ends that he can rely on to get him through the early season bumps. Underwood, overall, I expect some growing pains from. Michigan, I expect to be a better team the second half of the season, just like last year. Unfortunate that they have the Oklahoma game so early that's probably going to cause a speed bump. But after that, they really get a pretty nice run through the second half of conference play leading up to the Ohio State game, which they get at home, going for 5 straight in the series. All right, we've gone through the Power 4, as we're still calling it. You guys know my opinion. I think it's more of a Power 2 these days, but the 4 major conferences nonetheless. Let's talk about the teams that we haven't talked about yet. And we got to start with Notre Dame. Not in a major conference, not in a conference at all, but they still made the national title game last year. It was the first time in a while that it felt like Notre Dame won a big game or 2. They beat Georgia and Penn State on their way to that title game and felt like they had a good chance early on in that game, but Riley Leonard, I think, ran 11 times on the opening drive and then was seen on the sideline puking not nearly as effective the rest of the game, unable to keep up with the depth of talent that Ohio State threw at them in that game. But still, Notre Dame clearly building towards something with head coach Marcus Freeman, one of the younger head coaches in the sport. He's got a really nice supporting staff behind him as well. They did lose 6 players to the NFL, including some very good defensive pieces that I think they're going to miss. Cornerback Benjamin Morrison, safety Xavier Watts, and linebacker Jack Kaiser all leave, as well as defensive tackle Riley Mills, who was injured for a lot of the playoffs. The aforementioned Leonard as well was a 6th round pick. And we have breaking news here, which actually will be a few days late at this point, but Notre Dame has finally named a starting quarterback, and that is CJ Carr. It took him a little while. Didn't exactly grab the reins, but did eventually beat out Kenny Minchey for the starting job here. Notre Dame returns 5 experienced offensive linemen, but they did lose several key depth pieces up front, 2 to the Big Ten and 1 to Tennessee. The depth along the offensive line was an issue at times last year, and I think that could be a problem again this year. The good thing for them is they have the best running back room in the country, led by probably the best individual running back, Jeremiah Love, but Jadarian Price and Aeneas Williams will also play key roles for this offense. Jaden Greathouse returns, and they bring in a very good receiver from Virginia in Malachi Fields. Will Pauling comes over from Wisconsin as well, and Notre Dame feels like this is the best receiver room that they've had in quite some time. It will all come down to whether they have a reliable enough option throwing to them and whether they can protect that guy. I expect Notre Dame ultimately to be a pretty similar team as last year, but the schedule sets up so that they could be out of the playoff conversation very early. They play Miami on the road in week 1 and then host Texas A&M in a rematch in week 3. If they lose both of those games to start, it could put them behind the 8 ball for the rest of the year, even though the rest of the schedule is much easier. There are some other potentially tricky games, like a road trip to Arkansas. Boise State comes to town, but Notre Dame will be a very solid favorite of about 17 points. And then, of course, the yearly rivalry game with USC, which for some reason is in week 8 this year. The win total is at 10.5. It's juiced pretty solidly to the under. And honestly, if you're looking for a quicker cash, this might be a good under to take. However, if they win one of those games, this is going to be a sweat to the end. As I said, there's a lot of really easy matchups up and down the rest of this schedule. So you're really asking for Notre Dame to start slow, which I don't think is unreasonable given the quarterback transition. But still, Notre Dame, one of the most talented rosters overall in the sport. They are on the blue chip ratio, the number 8 overall roster in America. Now begins our rapid fire journey through the rest of college football. We got to start with UConn, the only other independent school at the moment. They actually went 9-4 a year ago. Jim Mora Jr. seems to be building something there. Definitely more of a basketball school overall, but UConn starting to build up the football program a little bit. Quarterback Joe Fagnano returns, Cam Edwards at running back, and Skylar Bell at receiver as well. So a nice couple of pieces on offense. I'm not sure what else they have around them, but UConn could be a bit of a sleeper team again this year. Going out to the Pac-2, we've got Oregon State and Washington State. Generally, people seem to be higher on Oregon State. Malik Murphy, the quarterback, transfers in there, originally started at Texas, went to Duke for a year, now he's out on the West Coast. There are 2 skill guys that I want to highlight. Anthony Hankerson, running back, started his career at Colorado, but he's been there now for 2 years, was very good last year. Darius Clemens, as well, a big-bodied receiver, started to break out last year. I think there's more there. I can't say I'm a big Malik Murphy guy myself, though, so I'm tempering my expectations with Oregon State. Seems like a lot of coin flippy games on their schedule. Washington State, probably one of the most unpredictable teams in the sport. They got ravaged by the transfer portal. They lost their coaching staff. Jake Dickert, the head coach, goes to Wake Forest. They replaced him with the head coach from South Dakota State, who did have a ton of success at the FCS level, so probably will be good eventually. And I haven't seen who they're starting at quarterback yet, but they did get a transfer from Pittsburgh, Julian Duggar, who I'm very high on. He played great in the bowl game against Toledo, and I saw it in person. I want to see him be Washington State's starter this year. I hope they make that choice because that will make them a very exciting and fun team to watch. Outside of that, don't really know what to expect. A million transfers out and coming in. Let's talk about the American Conference. We'll go through these in alphabetical order, both in terms of the teams and the conferences. Army, I'm expecting some significant regression from. They lost their quarterback, a lot of key pieces from what was a pretty good team last year, but lean pretty strong to the under on the 7.5 win total for them. Charlotte's got a ton of turnover. They've got a whole new staff. They hired the head coach from Ohio, which I think is a good hire in the long term. I don't know how much to expect this year, though. The win total is at 3.5, juice to the under. They do have a couple of interesting quarterback options. I'm expecting Connor Harrell to start, former North Carolina quarterback, and they play UNC in week 2. I talked about that in the ACC preview. Very sneaky game. But outside of that, not a ton to project for Charlotte's season. East Carolina should be a pretty fun offensive team. They've got some nice skill players, both at running back and receiver. They have 2 former Big Ten quarterbacks to choose from in Caton Hauser from Michigan State and Mike Wright from Northwestern. Wright is more of a runner, Hauser's more of a passer, so depending on how they want to run their offense, that will be the choice that they make. The defense, though, I think is going to be really bad. I'm going to be looking to take some overs for ECU this year. FAU, I kind of feel the same about. They did get a nice quarterback in the portal from Western Kentucky, Caden Veltkamp. They bring back their best receiver, Easton Messer. Not a lot of pieces I like on the defensive side of the ball, though. That's going to be a theme for a lot of these G5 teams, but especially some of these in the American. FAU, probably some high-scoring battles this year. Memphis, I think, is about to take a big step down this year. They lost a lot of pieces off of a very talented offense a year ago. Quarterback Seth Hennigan set a lot of records there. They replaced him with Brendan Lewis from Nevada, a guy I've just never been too impressed with. Really struggled throughout his career with the Wolfpack. Memphis does have that FedEx money, so they're going to replace a lot of guys through the portal every year. They do have probably more talent on the defensive side of the ball this year, but a big step back I expect for the offense. So just a different team with Memphis this year. I would rather back some value shots in this conference rather than them or Tulane, which we'll get to in a second as far as winning the conference. Next is Navy, a team that I think should be very good again this season. You really only need 3 players to run Navy's playbook effectively. You need a good quarterback who can run, a good running back who can catch tosses on the edge, and a fullback who can bruise people up the middle. And Navy's got great players at all 3 of those positions. They were a very fun offense last year with Blake Horvath, Eli Heidenreich, and Alex Texa. And I expect it to be very similar again this year. Military academies are so hard to project because they always bring in the lowest classes as far as recruiting stars of anyone in the country, but at the same time, these guys are enlisting in the military, so they're probably a little tougher than your average football player. Navy, I am expected to be good. The win total is at 8.5, juice to the over. I do lean to the over, but again, I would rather take some value shots with some other teams in this conference that we'll get to in a second. Let's actually talk about one of those teams right now, North Texas, an athletic program that I think is better than it gets credit for. They're very good at basketball as well. Football has been a little bit up and down, but you can always count on them to have an electric offense. The defensive side of the ball might be more exciting with this team this year, though. They bring in a new defensive coordinator from Sam Houston, who is in his 20s, one of the youngest coordinators in the business. And he brought a bunch of his players with him from a defense that last year improved steadily throughout the year and really put up impressive numbers in Conference USA. On the offensive side of the ball, North Texas just named their starting quarterback Drew Mestamaker Haas. I think I might be pronouncing that wrong, but he won the job over Reese Poffenbarger, another funny name. This kid actually played safety in high school. He walked on here at North Texas, played in the bowl game last year at quarterback. First time he played the position since 9th grade. Ended up throwing for 393 yards and rushing for another 55. And it's important to note here that his head coach, Eric Morris, is somewhat of a quarterback guru. He's worked with guys like Patrick Mahomes and Baker Mayfield in the past, and more recently, Cam Ward and John Mateer when he was at Washington State. So I think there's a ton of potential here with this combination of head coach and quarterback. I like the defensive personnel and staff, and I just think this North Texas team is not getting enough respect in the odds. I got them at 18-1 to win this league and 60-1 to make the college football playoff. It's important to note also that the American Conference has the best odds of any G5 league to get a team into the playoff at plus 120 on the only book that I could find it at. So I'm going to be taking a couple of teams in this league to make it, and North Texas is the first one. Just a couple more teams to touch on in the American. Rice, I think, is a pretty interesting one this year. Quarterback Chase Jenkins just won the job. He comes over from an FCS school where he ran a very unique offense called the Gun Choice offense. This was at Davidson. That team led the nation in rushing 6 of the last 7 years in the FCS. And I guess they're going to try and implement it here at Rice. I'm not exactly sure what it's going to look like, but it should give the rest of this league a different look compared to the rest of the teams that they're used to seeing. Hard to have a lot of optimism about Temple in the short term. Should have a decent run game over there. They bring in a new head coach in Casey Keeler from Sam Houston, who has won everywhere in his career. So long term, I think that's a decent hire. This year, win totals at 3.5, so don't expect much. Tulane, obviously the favorites in this league. I'm not buying them this year, though. I've been very high on the program the past couple of years. I think they have a very good staff. Past 2 years, though, they've had really an SEC caliber defensive line, and they're still solid in the trenches, but I think they've fallen off a little bit this year. And the quarterback downgrade, I think, will be more dramatic than most are expecting. They lose Darian Mensah to Duke, who paid a hefty price for him to transfer there, and they replace him with 2 transfers themselves. Caden Simonza comes down there from Ball State, and Jake Retzlaff, a late add from BYU in the fall. Either way, whichever guy starts, I think is a significant downgrade. I like the under 8.5 here with the wins if you're going to take something with Tulane. Tulsa, I'm staying far away from. I'm seeing a little bit of hype with them in the market, but I'm not interested. Freshman quarterback, overall, not impressed with the roster, so Tulsa is a pass for me. UAB as well, I think probably the worst team in this conference. There's a couple others you could make an argument for, but Trent Dilfer, it just hasn't worked out there. Jalen Kitna is likely going to be their quarterback. Haven't heard that name in a few years for good reason, I thought, but I guess he's back in college football. UAB, I'm fully out on. I'll probably be looking to fade this team several times throughout the year. South Florida is kind of a trendy team in this league, and I understand the reasons why. Quarterback Byron Brown is one of the more experienced guys in the conference. I like Alex Golish as a head coach. I don't think he'll be at USF too much longer, so they should enjoy him while they've got him. They did lose Sean Atkins, though, a very productive receiver, and the schedule, I think, is pretty brutal. The non-conference, especially, their first 3 games, they host Boise, and then they travel to Florida and Miami. If they start 0-3 there, that's just bad vibes heading into conference play. I do think they have a decent chance of pulling off that Boise game, though. They opened around a 10-point underdog, and that line is all the way down to 6 at the time of recording this. It could go down even more. I wouldn't be shocked to see South Florida win that game outright, but they've got tough road games in conference play as well, with North Texas, Memphis, and Navy. Wanted to go over 6.5 here, but I'm going to be passing on this one. Not really taking a ton of win totals in the G5, mostly just some value shots to win the conferences. Now there's one more team I want to talk about in the American, and then we'll move on to the next league. This is my favorite team in all of the G5. I have them winning the American. I have them taking that automatic G5 playoff spot. I think they will be the highest rated team out of everyone, and I think they're the most talented team. That is the UTSA Roadrunners. They had a bit of a down year last year, 7-6, but 4 conference losses that they had leads in, all of, including 3 out of 4 in the fourth quarter. just some inexplicable losses. They lost to Rice 29-27, giving up a game-losing touchdown with 9 seconds left. They blew a 35-7 halftime lead at Tulsa to lose by 1 point. They led in the fourth quarter against Army and by 10 points against ECU. But this will be year 6 now under Jeff Traylor, and only one other time throughout his tenure has he finished as badly as last year, and that was year 1. He finished 7-5 that year, and then followed it up with 12-2 and 11-3. I'm expecting a similar turnaround after the 7-6 2024. As I said, this is the most talented roster in the G5. 7% of the roster, which may not seem like a lot, but for the G5, trust me, it is. That's how much of the roster is made up of 4- and 5-star recruits here. That's 53rd nationally and number 1 in the G5. UTSA will be led by a trio of talented offensive players: quarterback Owen McCown, running back Robert Henry Jr., and wide receiver Devin McCune. I really like their complementary skill guys as well, and all 11 starters on offense were on the team last year. I love the continuity here, I like the staff, and I just think this is a great spot to buy low on this team. The preseason AP poll dropped last Monday. They had 4 American teams receiving votes and 10 G5 teams overall, and UTSA was not included in those despite having the second best odds to win this league. I hope they take that as a sign of disrespect and come out hot, because they've got a real chance to make a statement if they can just be competitive with Texas early on. Ironically, I have a rematch with the Longhorns in the playoff picture, so we'll get to that later, but UTSA is my favorite team in the G5 by far. Heading over to Conference USA, this might be the league I have the least to say about. Delaware is a team that comes up from the FCS this year, along with Missouri State, 2 new teams to Division I. I'm probably a little bit higher on Delaware just because they have a really good running back in Jonathan Silver, but outside of that, hard to tell what we're going to get from either one of these teams. Usually, it's a little bit of a struggle in year 1 moving up to Division I. It can just be a difficult transition, so not expecting a ton from either one of these teams, maybe a little bit more from Delaware. FIU lost both of their receivers to Georgia Tech, including a 1,000-yard guy in Eric Rivers. They do return their backfield in Kawan Jenkins and Keyshawn Owens, but the defense is probably going to take a significant step back. Jacksonville State, probably the biggest step back of anyone in this league. They lost, obviously, their staff, including head coach Rich Rodriguez, to West Virginia. He took a lot of his best players with him. They have an interesting backfield, I guess, of former P4 players. Gavin Wimsatt, quarterback, started his career at Rutgers, went to Kentucky for a year. Now he's there. Not much of a passer. Cam Cook played at TCU, was the starter off and on, but I think will probably be better suited to playing at this level. I'm not expecting much from Jacksonville State, even though they won the league a year ago. Kennesaw, I think, could actually be a little better this year. I'm not saying they're going to win the league, but they were one of the worst teams in D1 a year ago. But a whole new offense from the transfer portal, including a quarterback who was the backup at Georgia Southern last year, but started his career at Indiana. They play at IU in week 2, so that should be an interesting storyline to follow there. Defense could be sneaky good as well. Liberty, I have winning this league, though, pretty easily, I think. I got them at plus 115 to win Conference USA. It's minus odds on most books, so shop around if you can for that one. But heard there were some locker room issues last year. They think they fixed the issue with some of the transfers going in and out this summer. They replaced their quarterback with Ethan Vasco from Coastal Carolina. Should be more of a steady hand there, and I think they roll this league with their run game and defense. Louisiana Tech is actually in the top 3 in terms of odds to win the league, but I don't quite understand that one. Looking at the roster, there's not much to like for me, and I think Sonny Cumbie is on the hot seat. I was honestly surprised that he got another year this year. He's got to perform or else, and I don't like backing coaches in those type of situations. Gonna skip a few teams here. I don't really have much to say about Middle Tennessee or New Mexico State. Just gonna be rough seasons for both of those teams most likely. Sam Houston, I think, is probably my favorite team in this league outside of Liberty. I have them playing in the conference title game. Phil Longo comes over to be their head coach. Longtime air raid offensive coordinator, was really ahead of his time at one point, and was also the offensive coordinator at Sam Houston at one point in his career. They have a nice backfield with Hunter Watson returning at quarterback and a really nice pair of running backs with Shane Porter and then Alton McCaskill, a name you probably haven't heard in a while. He was at Colorado with Deion Sanders, didn't seem to fit with the staff too well there, but gets a chance at a much lower level. This is a former big-time recruit. I think he could pop in this conference. UTEP is a team I've seen a lot of people in the market be pretty high on. I'm not quite there myself with them. Malachi Nelson comes in at quarterback. He's been at a couple different stops now, but he was a highly touted recruit at one point. If he starts, then maybe that raises their ceiling. We just haven't seen a lot from him in college yet. They've got a decent running back, a couple good receivers. Not sure what to expect from the defense, but like I said, some sharp bettors moving that market up, and they seem to like UTEP this year. Western Kentucky actually had a pretty good defense last year, which is very rare for their program. Expecting a big step back for them this year. Plus, they lost their quarterback in the portal to Florida Atlantic. Western Kentucky, usually one of the better programs. But let's go team by team real quick and talk about them. Akron, maybe improving slowly under Joe Moorhead. He was a very solid coordinator. I always thought he was a good coordinator. Hasn't had as much success as a head coach, but did go 4-8 a year ago after back-to-back 2-10 seasons. He's got his quarterback returning with Ben Finley. Outside of that, not a ton to love, but maybe they'll take another step in the right direction. Bowling Green, I expect a step in the wrong direction. It's really hard to replace a player like Fannin Jr. at tight end. He was a unique talent for them. Quarterback, they replace Connor Bazelak with Drew Pine, another former Power 5 quarterback, but one that, again, didn't have a ton of success at that level. They do bring in Arliss Boardingham, a tight end from Florida, so clearly they're trying to replicate what they had last year on offense, but I think they lost a lot of depth and overall talent. I would expect a solid step back for this team. Buffalo is probably my favorite team in this conference. They added a nice transfer quarterback in Taquan Roberson to go with what was already a great run offense and a solid defense. I like Victor Snow a lot at receiver, and Aljay Henderson might be the best running back in the G5. I've got Buffalo to win this league at 5.5 to 1. The three directional schools are all probably headed for a rough year in the state of Michigan: Central, Eastern, and Western Michigan. I would say Eastern might have the best outlook just because I like their coach the best. They've got a couple of potentially NFL caliber linemen. Not a ton of talent outside of that, though. Former Michigan State quarterback Noah Kim is expected to be the starter there, and they do have one good receiver with Terry Lockett Jr. The other two teams I can't really find much to be excited about. Jalen Buckley is a solid running back for Western Michigan. Overall, not expecting much from those three teams. Miami of Ohio, they do have DeQuan Finn at quarterback. He's played in the MAC before, was at Toledo at one point. Tried to transfer up to Baylor, did not make it through the season as the starter, and now he's back at this level. We'll see if he can dominate or put up similar numbers to his former stops. Northern Illinois, I'm leaning towards selling on. Last year, they got a big win over Notre Dame, obviously, and then really just were not able to capitalize on that hype. Did not have a good season overall. Their quarterback transferred to be the backup at Illinois, and they're leaving this conference soon to go join the Mountain West, which, again, makes no sense geographically, but I don't really like the direction this program's heading in. Ohio is probably my second favorite team in this conference. I have them playing Buffalo in the title game. Their backfield is very exciting. Parker Navarro, maybe the best quarterback in this league. He really burst onto the scene last year as a true dual threat, dynamic runner, and then their running back is very solid as well. So Ohio, I think, should be a good team. They're second in the odds to win the league as well. Toledo is the favorites, as they often have been under Jason Candle, and yet, over the past 4 years, I just heard this stat the other day, they have actually lost 15 games as a favorite, which leads the nation. That's just a staff that I don't really feel like I can trust, especially given the price. to win this conference. Way too big of a favorite in my eyes. I'm passing on Toledo. Let's head out to the Mountain West, where Boise State really just rolled over this league last year. Ashton Jeanty leading the charge on what was a playoff team. This year, a lot of people expect them to just run it back, even though Jeanty is gone. I'm not quite so sure about that. They will be favored in every conference game, and there's no doubt they have the most overall talent in this league. But I'm not a huge believer in quarterback Maddox Madsen. I think he's solid, but he's going to have a lot more on his plate this year. They do have some solid running backs to step in for Jeanty, but it's hard to imagine that they'll be able to replace his production, even collectively as a unit. I lean towards the under 10.5 on the win total, and I don't think there is much of a shoe-in to make the college football playoff out of the G5 like everyone expects. Colorado State does have some continuity. Their coach is back. Their quarterback is back. I'm not personally too high on either of them. They lost Torrey Horton, their NFL receiver, leaning towards the under 6.5 for them. Fresno is a team that has a decent amount of turnover. New staff. They got their head coach from North Dakota State. They bring in a quarterback from Rice, E.J. Warner, who I think has some decent potential. They have a solid running back. And I think Fresno, as a program, is slept on a little bit. I think they haven't been quite at the same level of Boise, but they are undoubtedly in the upper tier of the Mountain West as a program. And after a down year, I expect a bit of a bounce back, even with the turnover. I like the over 6.5 there. Hawaii is a team to potentially get excited about. Micah Alejado is a quarterback I want to highlight. Threw for 469 yards and 5 touchdowns in his one start last year against New Mexico. It took a while for them to decide to unleash him, but as the full-time starter this year, I think he should lead a pretty dynamic offense with some really good receivers. Hawaii opens their season in week 0 this weekend against Stanford, and they have actually flipped from a short underdog to a 2.5-point favorite against the Power 4 opponent. Nevada's a team that's hard to get excited about. Year 2 of Jeff Choate after he came over from Texas as their defensive coordinator. Asked a diehard fan friend of mine what there is to be excited about this team, and he said not much. So win totals at 3.5. Maybe we'll check back in with Nevada next year. New Mexico, yet another G5 team with a ton of turnover. Brand new staff. They bring the head coach over from Idaho, who also brings his quarterback with him. So that pairing should be solid, but it's going to take a lot of time to build up the roster depth here. New Mexico was surprisingly a fun offense last year, but again, that entire team is essentially gone. This head coach is graded pretty highly from everything that I've seen, but it's going to take time. San Diego State should have a decent defense, but offensively, they were woeful last year. They're going to try a Michigan transfer in Jaden Denegal at quarterback. I personally don't think it's going to work out too well, but I wish the best for him. San Jose State is the team I'm most excited about in the Mountain West. Ken Niumatalolo is in year 2 now, coming over from Navy, and they had a pretty solid year in 2024, returning a decent amount of that offensive production as well. Walker Eggett returns at quarterback, and Floyd Chalk IV at running back anchor what should be a very fun unit and exciting scheme on that side of the ball. They did lose their all-everything receiver in Nick Nash, who was setting records last year. That is a concern, but I like the scheme enough to back this team regardless. I think this is the best challenger to Boise State. I think they're third in the odds on most books to win the league, but I prefer them to UNLV, who we'll talk about next. Dan Mullen comes in there. I love Dan Mullen. I just don't know about year 1. The quarterback situation, they do have 2 Power 4 transfers, but neither one of them, I think, are really the answer here. Alex Orji comes over from Michigan and Anthony Colandrea from Virginia. Both very erratic players. They're definitely going to have some highlights this year, but they will also have some facepalm moments, and that to me just limits UNLV's ceiling a little bit. They've got very solid skill position players as well, but randomly they lost their defensive coordinator in the spring, a leave of absence. Can't really find too much info on that, but that happened. So UNLV, tentatively cautious on, even though it is a talented roster. Utah State, definitely a year away. They did just hire Bronco Mendenhall from New Mexico. He was originally at BYU once upon a time and had a lot of success in this state. I think he will build Utah State back up. We'll check in with them next year. They should be better in 2026. Wyoming should be good in the trenches, and they have a couple of solid running backs. Couple of options at quarterback, but a lot of question marks really across this roster. Could potentially be an overachiever here, but I could also see them crash and burn. Not much else to say about Wyoming. And the fifth and final G5 league, probably the second best one if I had to rate them in order, the Sun Belt. Appalachian State, not a big fan of their coach, but they do have the best pair of running backs in the league, Kanye Roberts and Rashad Dubinion, coming over from Arkansas. They should be able to run the ball very well. Just depends on what the balance is looking like. They lost their quarterback to the portal, ended up at Tennessee. That's Joey Aguilar. I think they can definitely do better in terms of the turnover department there, but I don't know who they're going to start there, and the defense I'm not super high on. Arkansas State is similar, another year of Jalen Rayner, who can be very exciting at the quarterback spot, a dual threat, but the defense was just absolutely terrible last year. And yet they went 7-0 in close games. This would definitely be a team I'd be looking to sell this year. Georgia Southern is a team I'm tentatively high on. Clay Helton was a coach that didn't have so much success at USC, but in year 3 at Georgia Southern, had his best season, finishing 8-5, and seems to be building something here. They've got a really solid roster overall. I think they have the best offensive line in the conference, the best tight end. They've got a good receiver, a good running back, 2 really good corners. They need better quarterback play from JC French. He threw way too many interceptions. If he can cut down on that, they're a sleeper for this conference. Over 7.5 wins, I would lean that way, but a tough non-conference schedule with both USC and Fresno State on the road. Georgia State, I have a lot less to say about. They do have a couple of nice skill guys. Otherwise, just a lot of question marks across the roster. James Madison is a pretty solid favorite to win this conference. Alonzo Barnett returns at quarterback. They also add Matthew Sluka from UNLV, who you may remember being in the news a year ago. Had some controversy surrounding his NIL situation at UNLV. I thought he would transfer somewhere where he would be the starter, but it appears he'll be the backup to start the season at James Madison. Maybe he'll take over the spot eventually. They definitely have the best and most talented roster overall in the league. I'm a little bit more hesitant to back them, though, just because I am higher on some of the other teams near the top of the odds list. Marshall was really a victim of this era of college football. There's really no other way to say that about their offseason. They lost their coach and staff and basically their entire roster to Southern Miss after winning the league last year. It's pretty unprecedented for that to happen within a conference. Southern Miss is another Sun Belt team, but Marshall, unfortunately, is going to get the short end of the stick here. They may take the biggest step back of anyone in the country. Their win total was all the way down at 4.5 after winning the league. Louisiana kind of popped out of nowhere last year, had a good year. They bring in a quarterback transfer from Ole Miss and Walker Howard, and 2 really solid running backs. You could basically call them Thunder and Lightning. The Thunder guy is 5'9", 235, so he's a real beast. Decent roster overall. I would lean towards the over on the 7.5. Old Dominion, another sneaky team here, a little bit lower down on the odds list, but they return a decent quarterback in Colton Joseph and a very good linebacker, Jason Henderson, one of the best in the entire country. Missed most of last year due to injury, but had like 150 tackles the year before. He's going to anchor what should be a solid defense. Old Dominion, very sneaky team considering where they are on that odds list. Southern Miss, as I said, they basically took Marshall's entire roster as well as their coach. As a result, that's led to a ton of hype surrounding this program this year. We have to remember they were one of the worst teams in the entire country a year ago. I know there's a lot of turnover here, and maybe it can flip around very quickly. Win total is at 5.5. I still kind of lean under on that, and I've seen some people taking them to win this conference. I just think we need to press the brake pedal just a little bit with this team. South Alabama, another team near the top of the odds that should be very solid. Year 2 under head coach Major Applewhite. rare in the G5 to have a returning head coach. There are like 40 new head coaches across these leagues. They did lose their quarterback, Gio Lopez, but they replace him with a Power 4 transfer in Zach Pyron, who has had some limited success when he's seen the field at several stops. More of a running quarterback than a passer, but South Alabama could build a decent identity around him. Not much depth on this roster, though, I will say. So if you see some injuries with this roster, I would start to fade them as we get deeper into the season. Not much to say about Troy and Louisiana Monroe. Not expecting much from either one of these teams. A little bit of an improved roster for Louisiana Monroe, but still a couple years away. Ra Thomas is somehow playing football for Troy. Not sure how that is the case, but he is there. And then Texas State is the last team to cover in this league. They're a team that certainly has money. They have resources that are unlike some of the other programs in the G5. Last year really felt like it was supposed to be their year. They were favored against Arizona State and had a chance to win that game at home. It was the biggest game really in their school's history. Made some critical errors and just were not able to come through. And that was really the story of their season. They were favored in basically every game, but they finished 7-5. So I don't know how we're supposed to trust them this year. They've got a couple different quarterback options from Power 4 schools. It sounds like they're going to take the kid from Auburn to be the starter. Got some good running backs. They do have the biggest offensive line in the entire country, with an average of 341 pounds on those 5 guys. So that is something to behold. That might be something that defensive lines in this league struggle to deal with. We're going to shift gears here a little bit at this point of the podcast. If you're listening on Spotify and you don't have your video mode already on, I would change that at this point in time. I've gone through and ranked my top players at each position for each of the 4 major conferences. This is all meant in good fun, and it's all projection, so let's not get too upset about it, but feel free to discuss in the comments. Let's start with SEC quarterbacks. You'll see them on the screen. I have DJ Lagway as the top quarterback in this league. Obviously, Lenora Sellers, more proven production a year ago, but Lagway, a higher rated recruit. Those two are my top 2 there. I'm not going to read off the top 10 for each list here, but I'll highlight Ty Simpson as well, as I have a Heisman bet on him. Arch Manning, I probably have lower than most. I'm just expecting a little bit more of a difficult transition than most expect after Quinn Ewers had an up and down year last year. I don't think it'll be as smooth as everyone expects. Here's the top 10 for the Big Ten. Drew Aller is my number 1 quarterback. I think he is going to flourish this year with better weapons. They hit the portal and brought 3 receivers in that should help them a ton. Completed 0 passes to receivers in that game against Notre Dame in the playoffs. DeMond Williams Jr., very excited about him as a full-time starter for Washington. Bryce Underwood and Julian Sayin, you guys can flip those around however you like. That's more of a fandom thing, I will admit. I have him 1 spot higher than maybe some would. Preston Stone, I want to highlight as well, is a quarterback I don't think many are talking about. Got benched at SMU, but he should be good at Northwestern. Here's my top 10 quarterbacks for the Big 12. The top 2, you could go either way. Josh Hoover, Sawyer Robertson, I'm good with either one as the top quarterback in this league. Noah Fafita, I think, is being forgotten about a little bit. And then Connor Wigman coming over from Texas A&M. Big-time transfer get for Houston. He immediately upgrades their offense significantly. I've got Sam Levitt down a little bit lower than some might, but I think he is going to have a lot more responsibility on his shoulders this year. We'll see how he handles it. House Haney at Oklahoma State, I just want to mention real quick as an honorable mention. I don't have him in the top 10, but potential to reach that. Top 10 for the ACC. Most would have Cade Klubnik number 1. He's very solid, but I got to go with Carson Beck. He was the Heisman favorite in the preseason a year ago, and while he struggled with turnovers at times at Georgia, I'm not sure he was 100% healthy. He's going to be ready to go this year. He's going to have great weapons, and I think he's going to flourish down there. Darian Mensah and Eli Holstein are two guys that I'm very high on, and I'm very high on their teams. Should lead some very solid passing attacks. Honorable mention to Jaron Kiawi Sagapolutele is my best guess at how you pronounce his name. Cal just named him the starter. He is a 5-star true freshman, originally enrolled at Oregon, now is here with Cal. Entered the fall in a quarterback battle, but they just named him the starter. Tremendous talent and raises their ceiling. Not a ton of skill talent around him, but if he is ready to go, he could definitely join this list. Now let's shift over to running backs. You're looking at the top 10 that I have in the SEC. My number 1 overall back is Jaden Ott at Oklahoma. I don't think we saw the full capability of this kid last year. He showed it 2 years ago, wasn't fully healthy last year at Cal, but he is going to be back to full form for Oklahoma this year. I fully believe that. He's the type of player who shouldn't have to adjust to the SEC. The SEC will have to adjust to him. Caden Durham, I think, will really pop for LSU as the second year of a full-time starter role. Should be better run opportunities overall for that offense. Jaden Baugh is a guy I'm very high on at Florida. Another reason why I like that offense down there. And then which of these Texas backs takes the starting role? Both of them are top 10 caliber, but CJ Baxter and Trey Wisner probably splitting carries to start. I would think one of them probably takes the primary role as the season goes on, though. Honorable mention to Jam Miller, who did just get injured in fall camp, unfortunately for Alabama. I'm hearing he's expected to be back by week 4 or 5, so not a season ender, but he would probably be higher on the list if that wasn't the case. Top 10 backs in the Big Ten. I may not be very high on Minnesota overall, but Darius Taylor, I think, is the best running back in the Big Ten. Really has evolved into a dynamic running back who can also be a great pass catcher out of the backfield. He's powerful. He breaks tackles. What's not to like about him? Jonah Coleman at Washington, excellent as well. Nick Singleton leads a 2-headed backfield at Penn State. Katron Allen, definitely worthy of an honorable mention as well. James Peoples at Ohio State, I think, has a great opportunity to step in and replace a lot of the production that Henderson at Judkins left behind. And one more guy I want to mention is Jalen Berger at UCLA. He is now playing for his 3rd Big Ten school after starting at Wisconsin. Went to Michigan State for a little while, now settles at UCLA. He's 2nd highest in the odds to lead the Big Ten in rushing, so could be a potential sleeper there. Here's the top 10 for the Big 12. I love LJ Martin. I think he's going to be the centerpiece of BYU's offense. Ishmael Mahdi, a great transfer for Arizona, picked up from Texas State. Bryson Washington and Dawson Pendergrass, both for Baylor, are a 2-handed backfield. I think Washington, certainly the lead back there, though. And then Rice transfer Dean Connors at Houston, I think will have a great year. Top 10 backs in the ACC. Got to throw Jeremiah Love in there, even though Notre Dame isn't technically in this conference. Have to mention him in any conversation about top running backs in the country. The top 4 guys on this list, though, are really more like all-purpose backs. Jamal Haynes, Desmond Reed, Damon Claiborne, Isaac Brown, they're all pass-catching backs who can also really run effectively between the tackles. Some smaller guys on that list, but also will really make you miss in the open field. Gideon Davidson at Clemson is a freshman that has the talent to move rapidly up this list. Now for receivers, SEC, I have KC Concepcion as the top receiver in this league at Texas A&M, coming over from NC State. Big time transfer get for them. I think he is going to step in immediately and be the best receiver in this conference, followed closely by Eugene Wilson III at Florida. Has shown incredible flashes of talent when he's been on the field, has dealt with injuries throughout his career, hoping he can stay healthy this year. Just so many things to like about that Florida offense. Cam Coleman and Ryan Williams certainly would be flipped on any other list, but Coleman did start to play better towards the second half of the season last year, and both were very highly recruited players in last year's cycle. These are my top receivers in the Big Ten. Obviously, Jeremiah Smith is going to be number one. He is an absolute freak of nature. Denzel Boston, I think, is the most slept on receiver in this league for Washington. He just puts up numbers. Nick Marsh at Michigan State, true freshman last year, but highly productive immediately, and I think he is not getting enough attention. You've got two Penn State guys in the top 10, which has got to be a first, Devontae Ross and Trebor Pena, and then DT Sheffield, one more transfer to highlight here from North Texas, slots in to what is actually a pretty solid Rutgers receiving core as well. Caden Robinson at UCLA would have been considered for this list, but was just recently ruled that he does not have another year of eligibility. Big 12, top receivers. Chase Roberts for BYU. They've got the top running back and the top receiver. So if they could figure it out at quarterback, be careful fading BYU again. Josh Cameron at Baylor, I think, is excellent. Jace Brown, maybe slept on a little bit at Kansas State. Same thing for Joseph Manjack for TCU. I thought that was a huge get for Houston. And the only thing that held me back a little bit on how much I like Houston as a team. These are the top receivers I have in the ACC. You'll notice two Georgia Tech guys in the top 5 in Malik Rutherford and Eric Rivers. And then two Louisville guys near the top as well, Chris Bell and Colin Lacey. The talent in this league is really congregated amongst a few select teams for the most part. Honorable mentions to Malachi Fields for Notre Dame. He did actually play in the ACC for Virginia last year, but at Notre Dame will be one of the best receivers in the nation. And also to Jonte Cook at Syracuse. Again, a former 5-star recruit, as I mentioned in the ACC preview. We'll see if he lands some success here. Didn't see the field much at Texas, but could be very good here. These are my top 3 tight ends in each league. We've got Eli Stowers at Vanderbilt, Trey'Dez Green at LSU, a guy not many people are talking about, but a 6'7" speedster that can really cause matchup problems for them. And then Oscar Delp at Georgia. You could have picked either him or Lawson Lucky. They've got two really good ones. Kenyon Sadiq at Oregon, Jack Velling at Michigan State, and Max Clare at Ohio State are my 3. Clare is a transfer from Purdue and should be Ohio State's best tight end in a while. Year 2 for Velling in the same system and the same quarterback with Aiden Childs. They both came from Oregon State. In the Big 12, you've got Tanner Koziel, a transfer from Wisconsin. They've always got good tight ends. Terrence Carter's another transfer for Texas Tech. He came from Louisiana. And then Lincoln Cure is a 5-star freshman at Kansas State. They've got two really good ones as well, him and Garrett Oakley. You've got RJ Maryland at SMU. Justin Jolly at NC State, maybe the only piece of NC State's team I really like. And then Dan Villari at Syracuse, who started his collegiate career at the quarterback spot. These are my top 3 offensive lines in each league. And these are my top 10 impact defenders in each major league. For the SEC, my number 1 player has to be Dylan Stewart at the edge position. He just burst onto the scene last year and was truly a special player. In the Big Ten, you've got Caleb Downs, of course, originally at Alabama, was a superstar there and did not take a step back, transferring over to Ohio State and winning a national championship. He will be arguably the best defensive player in the nation. In the Big 12, you've got some transfers from Texas Tech and some returning guys that have been there forever on a lot of these other teams. It will be interesting to see the style clash between them and the rest of the league this year. In the ACC, I think the most slept-on player on the defensive side of the ball is Ruben Bain Jr., an edge rusher for Miami. He didn't play a ton last year due to some injuries, but when he did, he was an absolute game wrecker. He dominated the game against Florida, and he is truly a player that offenses have to game plan around. How about my top 3 overall offenses in each league? In the SEC, I've got LSU, Ole Miss, and Alabama, but you could make an argument for Florida being on this list as well. In the Big Ten, I've got Penn State, USC, and Washington in no particular order. I could make an argument for Indiana here as well. In the Big 12, I think Baylor, TCU, and Texas Tech should all be fantastic pass-first offenses, but all of them have the capability of running the ball as well. In the ACC, I actually have Georgia Tech as the overall best offense. I love their skill talent and their scheme. It's just a deadly combination. Clemson, of course, has more overall talent, but they will be very good as well. Pittsburgh, I have surprisingly on this list. I love the quarterback and running back combination, and they'll figure out the rest with their scheme. Top 3 defenses in each league. In the SEC, you got to go with Texas. They just return a ton of incredible players on that side of the ball. Going to be the strength of their team, in my opinion. Georgia as well should be back to being an elite defense. I think they'll take a step up from last year. And then Alabama, maybe the deepest on that side of the ball, particularly in the secondary. In the Big Ten, Ohio State's defense, I feel much stronger about than their offense. A little bit more returning production on that side of the ball. The D-line is surprisingly small, and that could be a concern in some of their bigger games, but they'll be very good overall as a unit. Penn State is always good, and so is Michigan. I'm really just going with some of the defaults here. Oregon could absolutely be on this list, though. In the Big 12, Utah's defense was still very good last year, despite them having a down year. I don't expect anything to change there. Texas Tech just brought in so much talent, and they have a ton of returning production on that side of the ball, too. Houston, I thought was great defensively last year. They should maintain that as well. And an honorable mention to Kansas State. Very good middle linebacker that was on the list there of individual players, and a solid unit overall year to year. Last but not least, in the ACC, I'm going with Miami as the top defense. This might be a bold take at the end of the year, given how terrible they were last year, but I love the improvements they've made in the secondary, and with a full season of a healthy Ruben Bain up front, I think they take a massive leap forward on defense. Clemson, of course, will be up there near the top, and then Duke, I'm impressed with how many great players they've got at all 3 levels, especially their secondary, very good. All right, we've previewed pretty much everything that we can, the teams, the players. Now it's time to get into some predictions. This will be the final segment of the entire podcast series, so I just want to take another second here to thank everybody who has taken some time to listen to this podcast. I hope that you all enjoyed and learned something that will help you be profitable in this college football season. But first, I will bring up my Heisman finalists. I'm going to give you 5 of them. They seem to change how many they take to New York each year, but I'll give you 5. I've got DJ Lagway, Ty Simpson, and Carson Beck locked in as bets. Garrett Nussmeier, I also think, is going to be there at the end of the year. I just think a quarterback this year is very likely to win. It's very rare that you go multiple years in a row without a quarterback winning the Heisman. Nussmeier could have entered the NFL draft, but he chose to return and lead what should be a very explosive offense. I think he'll be there in New York. And then out of respect to Jeremiah Smith, I have to put him on this list just because he's such an alien at receiver. He could absolutely get there, even though there's going to be a ton of defensive attention paid to him. And like I said, I think it'll be really difficult for a non-quarterback to win it again. If you're looking for a couple of long shots, I'm again going to suggest some quarterbacks here. Eli Holstein at Pittsburgh. They're definitely very pass heavy there. He's going to lead what should be a very productive unit. I think Pitt will once again surprise some people, and he could be possibly on this list. DeMond Williams Jr., if he takes as much of a step up as I'm expecting at Washington as the full-time starter, he could be there, real dual threat with his legs. And then Bryce Underwood, this one you got to take a little bit of a leap of faith for, as Michigan doesn't throw the ball a ton typically. I do think the offense is going to be a little bit different this year, and if he is ready to go early on, I mean, the talent is there. He's got a ridiculous wingspan on his arms, which gives him a big advantage at quarterback. He's got incredible athleticism. It's just going to be about whether he can read college defenses, as we talked about earlier. But at 50-1, why not take a small stab there? Obviously, not many freshmen win the award, but if Johnny Manziel can do it, maybe Bryce can do it too. How about conference title game matchups? In the ACC, no surprise, I've got Clemson there. but I've actually got them playing Duke. If you listen to the ACC preview, you know how high I am on that team and how much I like Darian Mensah at quarterback. I do think it'll be a little bit too much to overcome in that game against Clemson, so give me Clemson over Duke in the ACC title game. In the Big Ten, I've got Penn State beating Michigan. You guys know how much stock I'm buying in James Franklin's team this year. It does make me a little bit scared, not gonna lie, but we're committed at this point, and I like so many things about Penn State this year. I just have to go with what I'm seeing. And then Michigan, the more I hear about the team, the more positive I am about them. The schedule is rather favorable, having Ohio State at home. They don't play Penn State in the regular season. I think they find a way back to Indianapolis here, even if they do lose to Penn State ultimately. In the Big 12, there's so many different ways you could go here. I almost put Houston in this game, and I did take a bet on them as a long shot to win this conference. But I will take Utah over Baylor, two teams I'm also very high on. Utah is another one we have locked in as an official bet. In the SEC, I'm going with LSU over Texas. I think Georgia and Alabama are right there, obviously, but LSU is the team I have circled since the beginning. I think it's a do-or-die year for Brian Kelly, and I love everything that they brought back, plus added in the transfer portal on both sides of the ball. The roster's loaded, the recruiting has been great, and this is the year that they got to put it together. So I like LSU. Texas, the defense should carry them there. I'm a little bit more skeptical about the offense than most, but the defense is so good and the depth of talent overall on the roster. Favorable schedule overall. Couple games they could trip up, but I've got them getting back to Atlanta and losing once again. Let's quickly run through the G5 and then get into our playoff predictions. The American, I have UTSA beating Navy, although North Texas I could see in that game. Conference USA, I've got Liberty over Sam Houston. Liberty's going to beat whoever they play in that game. The MAC, I've got Buffalo over Ohio, but I could see that game going either way. I like Ohio as well. In the Mountain West, I've got San Jose State upsetting Boise State. Unpopular pick there. I'm going with the Spartans. Sunbelt, I'm going to take Old Dominion over Georgia Southern. This could be completely out of left field, and I could get this completely wrong, but I like both of these teams, and I don't think James Madison has quite enough to be as big of a favorite as they are in this league. Here's my playoff predictions. You can see them on the screen. LSU as the number 1 overall seed at 12-1. Penn State, identical record as the 2 seed. Utah slotting in there as the number 3, and Clemson as number 4. So even though the formatting has changed and the top 4 seeds are no longer guaranteed to conference champions, that's actually how I have it ending up again, with the Big 12 champ and the ACC champ ending up at numbers 3 and 4. Among the top at-large spots, you got to give it to Texas and Michigan, the losers of the SEC and Big Ten title games. Georgia and Alabama, as I mentioned, I think are very close. I have them both at 10-2, so they will be very high up there in terms of at-large bids. Baylor, I think, could sneak in here as well if they have a good enough record losing that Big 12 title game. Similar situation for Duke. Ultimately, I would not be surprised to see the committee hold one of these teams out and hold that conference title game loss against them and put in another Big Ten or SEC team that's been sitting at home for a week. I'm going to choose not to be cynical on this one, and I will put both Baylor and Duke, the losers of the ACC and Big 12 title games, in there as the 9 and 10 seeds. At the 11 spot, there's 3 teams that are very close for me, and it's Florida, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M. You could also make an argument for Auburn there, or even Oklahoma. The depth of the SEC is incredible, but given that Florida has the hardest schedule in the entire country, if they manage to go 9-3, I think they will be the highest ranked 3-loss team in the nation. In my projections, despite having those 3 losses, that will include wins over Texas and on the road against both Miami and Ole Miss. That should give them a slight leg up against some of the other 3-loss teams with similar resumes. In the number 12 slot, I have UTSA, which sets up a fascinating first round matchup against in-state Texas. Obviously, they'll be very outmatched there in terms of overall talent, but I could see that being a more competitive game than some would expect. The 8-9 game ends up being Alabama versus Baylor. Alabama would certainly have a talent advantage there, but depending on how things go, Baylor could have the more explosive offense. Georgia against Duke would likely be a bit of a mismatch as well. And then Michigan against Florida would actually pit my two favorite teams against each other. I promise I did not do that on purpose. To be honest, I would prefer to see both of those teams play somebody else, but this is how I see the cookie crumbling. In the second round, I have all four SEC teams advancing to face the top four seeds. And then my semifinals are Penn State against Florida and Clemson against Alabama. Those to me would be fascinating matchups and very fun games. You get the old school Clemson, Alabama. Can't really even say old school, but it's been a few years now since we had that routinely be the national title game. And then Penn State and Florida, two teams that haven't been here in a while. Penn State last year finally had some success, won a couple playoff games, looking to finish the job. And Florida, the upstart, I do think they have the talent to win a playoff game or two, depending on the matchups. I think those two matchups fit them very well in Michigan and Utah, but another scenario, they'd probably crash out in the first round. Either way, that's my semifinal. My final then is Penn State against Alabama. I am actually adding Alabama to win the national championship as a future. The more I learn about this team, the more I hear about their camp, the more I look into Ty Simpson, the more I like Alabama to have a huge bounce back year. So as invested as I am in LSU, I'm actually going to jump in with Alabama as well. I think it's a natural hedge in this spot. They play each other in the regular season, and either one of them will have a great chance to win it all if they could just make it in as a powerful SEC roster. All right, I'm sure some of you have just skipped to the spot. For those of you who are ready to lock some bets in, you'll be able to click on the shortcut here to get to this point. I'm going to list off every single futures bet that I have locked in. This will simply be a list. You guys have heard the analysis of all the teams. Just a list, every single bet in order here, starting with the group of five. One of the first bets I locked in actually was Buffalo to win the MAC at plus 550. I've got Liberty to win the Conference USA at plus 115. I've got UTSA to win the American Conference at plus 450. North Texas, I'm also taking a small shot on to win the American at plus 1500. Plus 1800 is UTSA to make the playoffs, and plus 6000 for North Texas to make the playoffs. I think one of those teams is your American winner and group of five representative in the bracket. I'm going to take a couple of small long shot stabs at San Jose State to win the Mountain West, plus 950. Georgia Southern to win the Sun Belt, plus 900. And Old Dominion also to win the Sun Belt at plus 1200. In the ACC, you guys have heard how much I like Duke. I'm taking over 7.5 wins plus 160. You could take over 6.5, but it's like minus 200. I would prefer to just take the plus money, and I think they will comfortably clear both numbers. I'm also taking them to make the playoff at plus 1400. Give me Georgia Tech over 7.5 wins, minus 150. A little bit of juice to pay there. I would not pay too much more, but 7.5 is a great number there for Georgia Tech. I'll also take a stab on them to make the playoffs, plus 750. North Carolina State, I'm going to take under 6.5 wins at minus 127. I would play that up to minus 140. Pittsburgh, over 6.5 wins, plus 115. Crazy to me that this is plus money. Wake Forest, over 4.5 wins at plus 116. And then our long shot bet of this conference, Carson Beck to win the Heisman at plus 2,000. I just can't pass up on these odds considering he was the favorite last year. He didn't play great, but have a bounce back year for us, Carson. Now to the Big 12. This is my favorite future of the bunch. Houston over 6.5 regular season wins, plus 110. I'm going to take them over 7.5 at plus 225 as well. And to win the Big 12 at plus 3,500, I do ultimately have them finishing third, but considering the odds at 35 to 1, you got to take that stab if I have them rated that high. TCU is another one. I'm taking a slight alternate line. You could pay some major juice to take over 6.5. I've gone with over 7.5 at plus 175. I feel comfortable with them getting to 8 or 9 wins. I'm taking a couple unders as well. Iowa State under 7.5 regular season wins, minus 125. I would play that up to minus 140. Arizona State under 8.5 regular season wins. I just think they take a step back after overachieving last year. West Virginia under 5.5 regular season wins. Year one disaster under Rich Rod is what I'm expecting. I'll also take a stab on them to finish winless in the Big 12 at plus 1,800. DM me if you'd like to know what book you can find that on. 2 more teams to win this league along with the Houston long shot. I'll take Utah. I found them at plus 800 a week or two ago. You probably won't find that price anywhere, but if you can get at least plus 650, I would take that one. Kansas as well, another somewhat long shot here. I've got them at plus 1,800. Big Ten futures. My favorite, Ohio State under 10.5 regular season wins at minus 130. It's more juice than that on most books, but I see them losing 2 or 3 regular season games coming off of a national title team that they have to replace a ton of production from. Oregon as well. I'll take under 10.5 regular season wins, minus 140, fading both of the big dogs in this league from a year ago. Illinois, I'm not buying the hype on. Under 7.5 regular season wins here at plus 160. Another one that you could take under 8.5 for some more juice. I just prefer to take the alternate line. I have them going 6-6, so I'm comfortably under either number. Rutgers over 5.5 regular season wins, I think is good value at minus 140. I've got Northwestern over 4 flat regular season wins plus 132. Over 3.5 is fine if you can find a reasonable line. I'm taking 2 teams to make the playoffs at reasonably long shot odds. Nebraska plus 900 and Washington plus 1,000. Penn State. We know how much stock I've got in this team. We've got 4 future bets on this Penn State team. Over 10.5 regular season wins, plus 125. I got a great price on that. You're probably not going to find it. I apologize. Same thing for over 7.5 conference wins, plus 125 as well on that. And then to win the Big Ten at plus 250 and the national championship at plus 750. That one I feel slightly less confident in, but I really think this has to be the year Penn State wins the conference. Last but not least, the SEC. We've got Tennessee under 8.5 wins, minus 122 is my favorite bet in the conference. The juice definitely has moved significantly on this one, but we did post it on Twitter at the time of taking it, so it's been out there for weeks. Hopefully some of you were able to take advantage of that line. We've got Vanderbilt under 5.5 wins, minus 155. Some of the most juice that I will ever pay for a future. Just hard for me to see a path forward to a bowl for Vandy. South Carolina, also under 7.5 wins, minus 130. Everyone's favorite Cinderella from a year ago. Should have made the playoffs. That really was their year. I don't see it again this year, despite having 2 stars. Auburn, over 7.5 wins, minus 160. And also to make the playoffs at plus 425. The things I'm hearing out of camp are definitely making me most nervous about this compared to any other future, so keep that in mind. If you do want to pass on this one, I don't blame you. Auburn certainly could be an unpredictable team. The quarterback situation, I thought it'd be better with Jackson Arnold. Not hearing great things, as Hugh Freeze says they might play all 3 guys in their opener against Baylor. I hope they get that figured out for the sake of those bets. Texas A&M over 8.5 wins, plus 140. People forget, last game of the season last year, they win that. They are in the SEC title game. I'll take them to make the playoffs. I have that as a boosted bet from a while ago at plus 306. I would take that anywhere up to plus 220, I would say. Missouri to make the playoffs is a longer shot there, but the schedule is pretty easy. So plus 880 is what I got on that one. You guys know how much I am in on LSU. We've got them to win the SEC at plus 1,000, to win the national championship at plus 1,800, and to win 10 plus games at plus 220. Alabama, as I said, this is a late ad. It has not been posted on Twitter yet. It will be shortly. Alabama to win the national championship, plus 1,000. Ty Simpson to win the Heisman for them as well at plus 2,200. DJ Lagway to win the Heisman at plus 2,000 for Florida. And then a stupid parlay that I really wish wasn't even out there, but I have to mention it because it is on my Twitter. LSU, Notre Dame, and Oregon all to make the playoffs at around plus 400. Don't take that bet. I took that about 2 months ago when I had less knowledge heading into this season. It was a time when I had access to a book that I don't normally get to spend any time on, so I took advantage of the little money that I had on there and placed a few bets. The other ones I'm still fine with. This one I'm regretting. So again, I'm mentioning it because it is public on my Twitter, but if you're listening to this, don't take that. I don't like Oregon as much this year, and Notre Dame I think is a coin flip whether they make it or not. So that is my full list of college football futures. It's taken a little while to get here, quite the journey, going through all the teams, some players, all sorts of fun stuff through this podcast today and through all 5 episodes leading up to this point. We're going to leave you guys with the screenshot of the power rating. And for those of you who don't know, a power rating, just a little bit different than your typical ranking. I would have some of these teams very differently rated based on merit, and that will remain the case throughout the season. This is simply who would I favor on a neutral field versus the other team. So there's going to be some weird rankings on here that maybe some people don't understand, but those of you who are really into the power ratings world, hopefully you guys enjoy. Here's the top 50, and you'll see it as we fade to black. If you enjoyed the podcast, make sure you like and share it with your friends. Follow me on Twitter at DailyCFBCBB, and enjoy the rest of your day.